if you look in the back of the program, you see Psalm 103. And we have those last two verses, and that's what we're going to just speak for a very short moment about, okay? So take a look at verse 13 and 14. And this, to me, is a fun and very surprising passage of the Bible. It says this, "As a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust." Now, to me, this is an amazing comparison. One of the big problems with Father's Day is that a lot of people have trouble because they grew up with difficulties with their fathers, okay? And yet, in spite of that, God says, you know what? I'm going to compare myself to fathers as a model for me. Now, is God just trying to flatter the men, the fathers? You know, I think in one sense, yes, because when I read it, I get very encouraged, all right? I get inspired that God would make a comparison to me favorably. I mean, think about it. God is perfect, right? And so he should be the paragon, the utmost model for compassion and everything else. And we're just made to be like him. But, you know, there's something going on here. God is trying to do something besides just encourage and inspire. Because this is about the only passage in the Bible like that. Very unique. And I think what he's doing is he's giving us a focus. He's giving us a target. He's saying out of all the things we can do as dads, this is the one that he wants to emulate. This is the one he wants to copy. Okay? Compassion. Now, most of us guys will say, God, if you want to learn compassion, copy my wife. But, you know, he says, no. I'm going to copy the dads. And that should startle us and make us think, well, why does God choose compassion? Well, the next verse tells us that. It says, for he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. Remember when God made man, right? Took the dust of the ground, formed it into our shape, and then what did he do? He breathed the breath of life into us. But he never forgets that we are creatures. We are created. We are not divine. We are not all-knowing. We are not all-powerful. And so he remembers our weakness, and he accommodates that weakness. And that's so important for us dads. When I translate it over to my life, I have to remember that my kids are young and they're going to make mistakes because they are ignorant, because they are young, and maybe because I just haven't instructed and trained them. I remember when my first daughter was a year and a half, and I came home one day and her toys covered the family room floor. And I says, Natalie, I want you to pick all that up and clean up this place. And my wife took a look at me and says, Ken, she's only one. You know, I forgot. You know, and I find that as a guy, I often have that tendency. I think my kids are just miniature adults. But they're not, are they? And we have to take that into consideration. So over the years, I've learned better. So one of my granddaughters, who's about the same age as Natalie, when I told her to clean up her room, Caitlin, she loves to play with bubbles. And so I try to give her every opportunity. Well, in the beginning, she couldn't quite blow. So I had to teach her how to blow, you know, pucker your lips and go out. And then she wanted to really, you know, have fun. So she wanted to hold the bottle. Well, you know what happens, right? It only lasts about 30 seconds to a minute before all of that soap solution is on the ground and no more fun. So what I finally learned to do, because once she got her hand on that little bottle, even though she was 1.5, she had a death grip on it, all right? Grandpa was not going to take it away. So what I would do is I would just keep the main soap, and I just give her enough so that she could dunk and make her bottle. Then if she lost it, guess what? Some more is coming. I'm right here, Caitlin. Okay? And so she wouldn't get disappointed. And so I learned to accommodate, her weakness. And so this insight continues to grow. And you develop it for every child, every situation. A lot of our problem is we think, like I said, kids are small adults. Kids live in the moment. If you say, we've got to leave, I got more errands to run, guess what? They can't understand that, right? They don't know what a next errand is. They don't know that you got to get into the car and take 20 minutes to travel to the pharmacy or whatever. So one day, we had to leave the playground, and Alexa, she's 4. This was just about a few months before she was 4, and she didn't want to leave yet. Now, at home, I can have a big clock, and I says, when the long hand moved from this number to this number, we have to go. And that gives them some warning. But we were at the playground, and there was no big clock for me to use. So you know what? She loves Let It Go from Frozen. In fact, she knows all the words. She can sing it all on her own. We put a mic in front of her, and she'll belt it out. I said, you know what, Alexa? We've got to leave. But I'll tell you, we won't leave until I finish playing this song for you. And she knew how long the song would last. She knew how long it would take, usually about 5 minutes for these songs. And so instead of saying 5 minutes, I says the time it takes for you to hear Frozen sung. And so you make these accommodations, you learn how to treat them not like tiny adults. You find these win-win approaches where they get their way and you get their way. You accommodate with wisdom and love. You see, men, it's not only about the heart. It calls for a lot of thoughtfulness, observation, and creative problem solving. Guys, sometimes we don't relate to compassion, but maybe when we put it in those terms, you can see that it's very functional. It's very practical. It's very action-oriented. And so that's what this comparison is about in Psalm 103. When God says, just like fathers have compassion on their children, I'm going to be like those kind of fathers. And you know why I need to do that? Because we're made of dust. Because they're really children and not small-statured adults. Okay? And I'll tell you one last thing as I close. When you can't think of what to do, here's a little saying that'll give you an overall solution. It's a quote. It goes like this: children are precious and fragile. Handle with prayer. Okay? Handle with prayer. And guess what? I'm still the parent to my adult children. So I still need this. And it's very, very useful.